Queen Mary in Long Beach, California. This historic hotel is unusual for several reasons. Not only is it filled with tales of ghostly encounters and paranormal occurrences, but it's actually housing a retired cruise ship docked in Long Beach, California, and overlooking the Los Angeles River. The Queen Mary had sailed as both a luxury ocean liner and troop ship during World War II. Now, more than 50 years after its final cruise, the ship has been transformed into a floating tourist attraction and hotel, best known for its bizarre haunting and happenings. There are several supposed paranormal hotspots aboard the Queen Mary, including the Bartina Room, the Mayfair Room, and Shaft Alley, the site of a hideous accident where a crew member was crushed to death under a hatch door. His ghost is said to haunt the area now. While the hotel offers several paranormal tours and activities, thrill-seeking guests won't want to miss an opportunity to spend the night in the stateroom B340. Past guests have reported unexplainable paranormal such as flickering lights, faucets that turn on and off without being touched, and loud knocking on the door in the middle of the night. In November 1974, Lindley Street in Bridgeport, Connecticut became the epicenter for one of the most documented hauntings in Connecticut history. A small bungalow-style home owned by the Goodwins was reported to be under attack by otherworldly forces that were allegedly responsible for moving furniture, breaking windows, levitating objects, making a cat talk, and generally perplexing and terrifying everyone who stepped foot inside the house. As the situation seemingly increased in intensity, police and firefighters were called in, as were news reporters, priests, paranormal investigators, and of course, Ed and Lorraine Warren. Thousands gathered in the street to try and catch a glimpse of the unexplained phenomenon that was supposedly happening inside of the little house. An international haunting sensation was born. What made this case was so compelling and drew so much attention as compared to other hauntings was the high number of reputable, reliable witnesses who reported experiencing the unusual activities firsthand. Beyond the Goodwins and their friends, more than 24 firefighters, police officers, and other investigators on the scene saw all sorts of bizarre happenings, including couches and chairs spontaneously moving across the floor, tables and a refrigerator levitating, paintings and crucifixes falling off the walls, and even knives flying through the air. They also recounted hearing a range of audio phenomenon from inexplicable knocks to bangings to disembodied voices. Sam the family cat was alleged to have said a number of things, including jingle bells and bye-bye, while the decorative swans in the front yard were also accused of making unearthly sounds. The majority of the weird activities seemed to be centered around the Goodwin's 10-year-old adopted daughter, Marcia, which is typical of many poltergeist hauntings. Witnesses reported that although many of the odd happenings happened when the young girl was around, a large number also occurred when she was either in another room or not even in the house at all. Although events came to a head in 1974, odd things had been happening since the Goodwins adopted Marcia in 1968, increasing in frequency and intensity in 1971. A year later was the first time the family officially called authorities, initially to help find the source of the pounding they had heard in the house at night. After that, more unusual events started happening, doors opening and closing themselves, as well as items being found in random places around the house. The family repeatedly called in the police to search for a cause to it all, but despite thorough investigations, nothing definitive was ever discovered. Activity reached a peak in November 1974, and by that time a number of investigators, including the Warrens, members of the American Society for Psychological Research and Psychological Research Foundation, and additional to the police, had staked out the house. They conducted interviews with family members, including Marcy, and detailed a number of seemingly inexplicable happenings. In addition to the aforementioned activities, TVs were tipping over, dressers were moving around, window shades were rolling up, and wall sleeves were pulling out of the wall, all without seeming provocation. The Goodwins, who claimed to not believe in the paranormal, were increasingly stressed and vexed by what was going on in their home. Meanwhile, with the local and national press covering the case, large and curious crowds were regularly gathering outside of the house. At one point, a few zealous neighbors tried to dispel the dark spirits in their own fashion, attempting to set the house on fire. They were quickly stopped. The situation seemed to be getting more intense when, a few weeks into the investigation, a police officer witnessed the young girl, Marcia, attempting to tip over a TV with her foot when she thought no one was watching. Being caught in the act, she was soon confessed that she was responsible for all the activities in the house and explained how she had done it all. The event was soon declared a hoax by the relieved police, who ended the official investigation, although questions still remained as to how Barsha had been able to perpetrate some of the witnessed events when she wasn't even in the house at all, or those when she had been in another room. The majority of the investigators, press, and curious crowds all soon went away. Interestingly enough, even though Barsha had admitted to being the cause of the events and apologized for her role in all of the strange happenings, purportedly continued to occur in the house for weeks to come. Eventually, the activities did stop and life went back to normal. More than 40 years later, what exactly happened at Bentley Street is still disputed. Some say it was all a hoax perpetrated by a young girl, while others were there and allegedly saw unusual things happen when that girl wasn't around, weren't so convinced it all hadn't been faked. One thing is for sure, it's one of the most interesting and famous haunted cases in Connecticut history. If you go, although the house at the center of Ledley Street is still standing, I'm going to discourage you guys. The people who live there now are strongly and ask that everyone respects their privacy. The current owners have no interest in discussing the house's history, and of course, there is no trespassing on the property. Guys, always remember that if you're going to go to a paranormal place, there's been happenings there, but people want to be respected and left alone. Be sure that you don't try to go up, don't try to trespass, don't try to intrude on them. There's been tons of people who have tried to do this at Ledley Street, and guys, respect their privacy. I know that it's fascinating. I know that you guys want to go out and see that type of stuff, but just be sure that you keep your distance, and I'm sure they won't mind if you take some pictures of it or take a video. Just don't get in their business. God bless each and every one of you. Welcome back to General Exploration Discovery, everybody. Today we're diving back into the paranormal with more ghost stories. This is going to be the start of ghost stories that are going to go throughout the course of hopefully several months. We're going to be getting back on the road here very soon and hitting up some paranormal places and launching our own investigations into these places. So a lot of great things coming. So let's get started with today's story. Lying beneath the forest and hills of central Kentucky is the largest known cave in the world. Mammoth Cave became a national park in 1941. It now welcomes some 2 million visitors annually. But humans first explored its endless paths, passages, and tunnels as long as 12,000 years ago. Indigenous people to the area used the cave as a burial place for their dead, and several mummies have been unearthed here over the years. The first owners of the land mined the cave for bat guano, essential to the production of gunpowder, until demand dropped off at the end of the War of 1812. It was then that the owners opened the cave to tourists, and it became more and more famous as the 19th century progressed. It's hardly surprising that an underground world of dark corners, shadowy passageways, and black waters has given rise to the number of ghostly tales, and those said to have taken place in Mammoth Cave span several generations. For every tourist who has no understanding of the natural phenomenon of the caves, consequently interrupts an occurrence as weird, there's a knowledgeable park ranger guide, geologist, or splunker who has encountered things that cannot be easily explained inside of Mammoth Cave. First visitors to Mammoth Cave several times and have talked with many people who have worked there. Most of the rangers are reluctant to discuss ghost stories, but if you don't laugh off the odd tales and will share their observations of strange phenomenon. Among those are 3 ghosts who particularly are noteworthy: a slave who had the distinction of being the first man to map the cave, and a girl spurned by her beau, and a one-time owner of the portion of the cave system known as Crystal Cave. In 1838, landowner Franklin Gore introduced Stephen Bishop, a 16-year-old slave, into the cave. Bishop would become the first man to explore and map the cave system. He served as an expert guide there for the rest of his life, and so loved the dark underground world that he purposely turned down a chance for freedom because it would mean leaving Mammoth Cave behind. Science teacher Larry Parcell of Bowling Green, Kentucky, worked as a summer's guide at the cave for a number of years and had strange experiences, one of which could have been connected to the ghost of Bishop. One day Parcell was on a tour when the group stopped. As another guide delivered his regular talk, the lights were all off, and it was Parcell's job to go down the path and turn them all back on. As Parcell was walking along, he saw a black man with a woman and 2 children. Parcells said the man had on white pants, a dark shirt, a white vest, and a white Panama hat. The people were real enough that I walked around them, Parcells said, but when I turned on the lights, they were no longer there. The late 1880s attire worn by the vanishing man was from Bishop's time, so who knows whether Bishop might have been in the mood to conduct a family tour of the cave. Parcells isn't the only one who may have encountered Stephen Bishop. Other visitors have reported seeing a man of the former slave's depiction and have assumed him to be part of the historic tour, perhaps playing his part of Bishop, but when they've asked about the man or looked for him again, he is gone. Another cave ghost is even more famous than Bishop, probably because her story was one told of tragedy in Mammoth Cave. An article that appeared in Knickerbocker magazine in February 1858, the central character is a girl named Melissa who lived near Mammoth Cave. The article states that she told the entire tale on her deathbed before succumbing to consumption, the affliction known as tuberculosis. Melissa had fallen in love with her tutor, a young Bostonian named Bolivar, but the tutor rebuffed Melissa's affections and began courting a neighbor girl instead. So Melissa plotted her revenge. Familiar with the twists and turns of Mammoth Cave, she lured Mr. Bolivar there for a tour at Echo River, an underground stream deep in the cave. She vanished inside of a side passage, leaving this poor man to find his own way out. Days passed without any sign of Bolivar. A despairing Melissa, who had intended only to play a cruel trick, began to make daily treks underground. She searched and called out to the object of her affection until she was hoarse, but Bolivar would never be seen again. A few years later, after the tragedy, Melissa was diagnosed with consumption and died a short time later. It is said that she never recovered from her guilt over her tutor's death. Many believe that her ghost is still seen and heard at Mammoth Cave, desperately searching for the unfortunate Mr. Bolivar. The story has its share of melodrama, but don't dismiss it too quickly. Gary Bramer, a former Mammoth Cave guide, says there may be something credible about the tale. Several years ago, Bramer and 4 others were in a boat on Echo River. One of the men left to get another paddle for the boat, and Bramer remembers what happened next. Those of us in the boat all heard a woman calling out. It wasn't screaming. It was more like she was looking for someone. It wasn't until the next day that Bramer first heard the story of Melissa. This wouldn't be Bramer's last encounter on the Echo River. A short time later, he was there with a new employee who had never seen the river before. She suddenly turned and grabbed his shoulder. "Did you hear a woman cough?" she asked. Bramer felt a cold chill. Melissa had died of tuberculosis, he remembered. The other employee verified Bramer's version of the experience and added that she had also heard gobbled voices rafting through the cave. On another night, believed she heard someone whisper her name. Not all of the weird tales from Mammoth Cave are set in areas accessible to the public. Many of the strangest come from Crystal Cave. Once believed to be a separate cave and operated as a private attraction, it is no longer open to the public, yet the stories that surround this portion of the cave are too mysterious to ignore. Most of these legends involve the ghost of W. Floyd Collins, an avid cave explorer and the former owner of Crystal Cave, which he had discovered by accident in the winter of 1916 to 1917. He and his family opened the cave in 1918, after which Collins constantly sought a commercially explorable hook that would ensnare tourists. His explorations led him to a hole on a nearby farm the press would later call the Sand Cave. In reality, a series of narrow twisting crevices that Collins sought to expand, but he thought could be a commercial boom, actually became his undoing. While working on site, January 30th, 1925, he was trapped in a small passage after part of the cave collapsed and his foot became wedged under a rock. Despite a massive effort, constantly shifting earth prevented searchers from rescuing Collins, who was trapped for 2 weeks before he died. A few decades back, a group of Mammoth Cave employees was on an after-hours excursion in Crystal Cave when they noticed an old wacky bottle resting on a rock ledge. One of the men in the group picked it up, looked at it, and put it back in the same spot. The group then walked on deeper into the cave. Later that evening, one of the men who was walking back towards the cave entrance and was passing the bottle when he heard something. "It was just behind my ear," he stated. I heard a sound as someone had flicked a finger against glass, a clink. I turned around just in time to see the bottle hit the ground. Another man who was with him jumped back in shock. He claimed that the whiskey bottle had fallen, but instead came straight out of the ledge and just dropped. The little clink was loud enough to make me look back towards the ledge, he remembered. And as he did, the bottle actually came out and then went right down in front of him. It was a very bizarre. Could the ghost of Floyd Collins be responsible for this strange occurrence? The men involved wondered whether this was the case, but a later event that took place in the area would be a more direct connection to the man. In July 1976, a former Crystal Cave employee named George Wood filed a report saying that he and another employee, Bill Cobb, spent a day checking springs for a study on underground water. They didn't make it to the last spring, which was near the abandoned Collins house on Flint Ridge. After dark, Cobb went to the spring while Wood waited near the truck. After a few moments, Wood heard the sound of a man crying out. At first, he thought it was his friend calling for help, but the voice seemed too high-pitched. It was also so faint that he had to listen carefully to hear what he was saying. The voice called out over and over again, "Help me, help me, help me, I'm trapped. Johnny, help me." As Wood stood there on the ledge on the dark road, he felt a cold chill as he recalled hearing about how Floyd Collins was trapped and where he was trapped in Sand Cave, only a short distance away. A few minutes later, Cobb returned to the truck, and Wood asked him if he'd been calling to him. Cobb said no, and that he had heard nothing while at the spring, but after hearing his friend's account of the cries, Cobb admitted that he too was spooked. The two men didn't waste any time before driving off. Could the spectral voice have really belonged to Floyd Collins? And, if so, could Johnny heard in the mysterious cry have referred to Johnny Gerald, a friend of Floyd's, and the last person to speak with him before the cave collapse sealed him off from rescue? Is his spirit still trapped in the cave, or could the sound have been merely an eerie echo of yesterday? An update on the media circus. The determined but failed attempt to rescue Floyd Collins became a national sensation, even without the aid of TV, radio, and the press were enough to keep the public fascinated by what was happening. In fact, it could be said that the story reached historic proportions. A journal reporter, William Burke Skeets Miller, who interviewed the trapped man several times, won the Pulitzer Prize for his coverage. Years later, the drama surrounding Collins' death inspired the 1951 movie Ace in the Hole, originally titled The Big Carnival, and famed author Robert Penn Warren based his novel The Cave, 1959, on the event. 2 years after Collins died, his family sold Crystal Cave to a local dentist who would cash in on the media circus surrounding the death in a rather remarkable way. As part of the property transfer, the dentist gained the right to examine Collins' body and move it to Crystal Cave. It was placed in a glass-covered bronze metal coffin that would be set in the middle of the tourist trail leading to the cave's main concourse. Thereafter, guides recounted the former owner's exploits as wide-eyed tourists gazed at Collins' waxen face. In 1889, W. Floyd Collins, cave explorer, businessman, promoter, found out his final resting place at nearby Ridge Cemetery. Today, his memory lives on in Floyd Collins Museum, located in Cave City on Old Mammoth Cave Road. An experienced Mammoth Cave tour guide named Joy Lyons tells of a tour taken a few years ago when the large group of two additional guides reached a point on the trail known as the Methodist Church. All of the lights were turned off as usual, allowing tourists to experience what the cave was like in total darkness. Lyons was standing at the back of the group when the lights went out and the lead ranger began his talk. All of a sudden, she felt a strong shove against her shoulder, hard enough that she had to step forward to keep from falling over. She turned to the ranger, who was supposed to be standing next to her, and whispered to him to stop clowning around. A moment later, after the lead ranger had ignited a lantern, Lyons saw that her fellow ranger was actually about 70 feet away. There was no way he could have been the one that shoved her and then walked so far in the pitch-black darkness. There was no one near me, she said, and it was a plainful shove. There are so many of us who feel things in various parts of the cave The accident wasn't frightening, but it's just proof that some things that happen in the cave cannot be explained. That is the story of Mammoth Cave. One of the first lessons learned by those who step into the world of the supernatural is that things in the spook dominion are seldom what they seem. The case of the Mount Tom bear is no exception. You'd think it was an animal story, but this is a tale that isn't about a bear, at least not the kind with fur and fangs. This story has been passed down by several people, but it was first heard and told from a retired Wisconsin hunter who encountered the Mount Tom bear firsthand. The hunter who encountered the Mount Tom bear, and more than once, he claimed, although no longer up to stalking the land as he once did, Pat Target was a true old-school outdoorsman in his day, and it was a passion for hunting that led to the strangest experience of his life. Back in 1960, Pat had said, "I had just graduated from high school in Racine, and my good friend Jeff and I were very much into the outdoors, especially hunting and fishing. But we even took up archery and learned to shoot the longbow. We spent literally all of our spare time in the field, learning animals and their ways and tracks and their migrations, and we got to be pretty good at hunting. We didn't get jobs until a year after we graduated, and we took a liking to trying to understand the night creatures, the coon, the fox, and the coyote." Pat and Jeff themselves became creatures of the night, prowling the countryside after Racine and Kenosha, scouting for Buckley hunting spots and getting on the friendly side of the farmers who owned the woods and fields. They also hunted fields owned by relatives, old farmers with land that had been in the family for generations around the communities of Burlington and Eagle Lake. The pair perfected their night hunting skills on a relative's farm a few miles east of Burlington in the Rusket area, near a wooded hill known as Mount Tom. Pat's elderly great uncle Michael owned 100 acres there. About half of it is open field. The rest was a dense forest of ancient hardwoods behind which rose Mount Tom. Jeff and Pat would leave home after supper and hang out at Michael's woods until 2 or 3 in the morning, teaching themselves to hunt raccoons without dogs. The nights were black as tar in the isolated rural area that they were in, so they used flashlights. That they were especially effective at shining the reflective eyes of the nocturnal animals at night. Their favorite time of the year was late fall. After the leaves had dropped and dried, the pair would get into the woods just at dusk while it was very quiet and settle in, listening until they could hear the animals walking in the woods around them at the sound of the approaching paws. On dry leaves, they would ready their flashlights and suddenly click them on to see what kind of creatures stood frozen in their beams. Not much scared us, Pat said. We got to understand what was there. Those were beautiful, quiet moments hearing the guttural sounds of coons of the night forest. One late October night, Pat drove into his great-uncle's field and stopped just outside the edge of the woods. Not too long after, Pat said he sat down. I could hear something coming from deep inside the woods. It was on 2 feet, like you would hear if you were walking in the woods yourself. It's coming straight to me and from way out. And he took time to look at the creature, several minutes to get to the other side of the brush line, which was about 15 feet from me, Pat said. And Jeff and him both had their flashlights off, but they could still tell that where it was moving because of the dry leaves. He held his position quietly, and so did it, the creature, out of the distance. As Pat's heart hammered inside his chest, he flickered on the flashlights and quickly scanned the brush. Nothing was there. Puzzled, he used the flashlight to signal Jeff that he had heard something. About 10 minutes later, Jeff signaled back that he too had heard something. Only just now, the two men ran to meet, like Pat and Jeff was sure something on 2 feet had walked up on him, and in exactly the same way with the incident. Behind them, and nothing else out of the ordinary happening, the two quickly hunted down the first raccoon they could find and went home. The next weekend they returned, first stopping, as they usually did, at Great-Uncle Michael's little farmhouse. Pat and Jeff never thought about telling Michael their strange experience, but headed back to the field. They took approximately the same positions outside of the woods as they had the last time, and lo and behold, said Pat, it happened again. Those eerie footsteps. So Pat said to himself, I'm going to be ready for this time. Pat forced himself to listen in complete silence as the footsteps crunched with rhythm on the crackly leaves, the sound growing steadily louder as the unseen presence approached. Pat could feel sweat pop out of his brow in spite of the cool night air all around them. Footsteps suddenly stopped on the other side of the bushes, just as they had before. Pat immediately switched on the brilliant square flashlight beam and again saw nothing but the trees against the blackness. It was a creature of the night, said Pat. Its eyes would reflect because the light was very strong. The next time Pat and Jeff dropped by the farmhouse before a hunt, Michael stopped them before they headed out to the field. "Oh, by the way, boys," Pat said to them casually, "have you guys run into the Mount Tom Bear yet?" Feeling uneasy, Pat asked his uncle what he was talking about. The old man told the boys that a long time ago an old fellow, also a hermit, lived in a shack in the woods near Mount Tom. Because he was wild-looking and was generally described as a grizzly, folks started calling him the Mount Tom Bear. One day, Michael said, the shack caught on fire and the hermit was trapped inside. He burned to death. And as time went on, people began encountering what they believed was the hermit's ghost. Michael just told us about it without Jeff or Pat saying anything to him. The explanation of what had been happening to us came without any prompting. As the pair continued hunting in those woods, the Mount Tom Bear seemed to retreat. Then one night, when Pat brought along his brother Dennis, the unseen presence did his thing yet again, as if it was a spirit of the old hermit wanted to check out the new person invading his turf. And all, Pat said his experience of the phenomenon 4 times. Dennis heard the phantom steps several other times on his own. 3 men stopped most of their nighttime hunting expeditions around 1967. By then, they were married and had families. They never saw the Mount Tom Bear again, Pat described, but I knew it was only 15 or 20 feet away from me, Pat said. We never heard it breathing and never picked it up in our lights. There was no smell, no vocalization. Our senses were keyed in then to pick up on anything, and I could hear a mouse at 50 feet in those dry leaves. This is one of the only things in my life that's totally unexplainable. If there's such a thing as hauntings, then this spirit does really haunt those woods, and it could still be out there. In 1997, a professional photographer named Ray Morganwick was taking pictures at Fort Bilfen. He later explained he is a wet plate photographer who creates images on glass using the original process and equipment from the 1860s. The shot, as you can see right here, was a posed image of the Garrison troops of the fort during the Civil War reenactment. It was up on the pediment overlooking the soldiers, and nobody was there but the troops in formation. When the plate was developed, he first thought to himself that the small markings to the upper right corner were blemishes on the plate's surface. But closer inspection, it appeared to be a human who isn't exactly standing on the ground. What is it? I don't know, they thought to themselves. Fort Bilfen probably has many more stories to tell. On September 11th, 1892, the Chicago Tribune ran a story, had a strange aspiration that is now puzzling Florida farmers. Transcribed here by Charlie Carlson, a respectable farmer named Peterson who owns a place just a few miles from Fernina, brings in a curious story of a ghost that haunts his cornfield and plows by the moonlight. He says that he first noticed the aspiration about a month ago when setting up with a sick child of his. He happened to look out in the field about the hour of midnight, and to his amazement, he saw a figure of a man guiding an ox team over the ground. The animals, the man, and the plow were all as plain to be seen as if it had been daylight. Though the rest of the field was in competitive gloom, not knowing what to make of this singular sight, he called his eldest son to go and see who the stranger was. The boy went at once, and his watching father was further amazed to see the lad walk right through the plow and man as if there was nothing there. When the boy returned, he declared that he had found nothing and nobody in the field. Mr. Peterson himself now resolved to go, and did so. But he could see no trace of the man and team, though on returning to the room from which he had seen the sight, he found them as plain as before. The man was dressed in the clothes of a laborer and wore a large, broad-brimmed hat which completely concealed his features. He seemed intent on his work, had never raised his head. When he cracked the whip he carried over the backs of the oxen, there was no noise. Since this time, Mr. Peterson says he's reportedly seen the phantom plowman and has called in neighbors to see it with him. Though always ongoing in the field, nothing was found. The people declare that the figure is that of a farmer who owned the place before Peterson bought it, and who one early morning was found dead in the field by his own hand, it was thought. Bell Witch Cave, a place of mystery, legend, located in Adams, Tennessee. This cave has been fascinating visitors for centuries. So let's explore some of the history of the cave, and I'm going to tell you guys the story today of the Bell Witch, which is a fascinating story, which I think you will find to be very fascinating. I know there's a lot of witches in there, guys. So here's the story of Bell Witch Cave. So the cave is situated on the property of the Bell family farm, where strange events began to occur in the early 19th century. The family reported hearing strange noises, seeing aspirations, and experiencing unexplained phenomenon. The cave's entrance is desolate in a scenic valley, surrounded by rolling hills and lush vegetation. If you were to go inside of Bell Witch Cave, as you venture into the cave, you would notice the eerie atmosphere and stunning formations. The cave stretches over 500 feet with towering, beautiful views and stalagmites that have taken thousands of years to form. The air is cool and damp, and the sound of the dripping water echoes through the passageways. The legend of the Bell Witch. According to legend, the Bell Witch was a malevolent spirit who tormented the Bell family and their visitors. Some believe it was a ghost of a woman named Kate Batts, who had a grudge against the family. The legend says that Kate was a neighbor of the Bells who was wronged by them in some way, leading to her to seek revenge from beyond the grave. Paranormal activity at Bell Witch Cave. Many visitors have reported strange occurrences such as disembodied voices, unexplained noises, and ghostly aspirations. Some have even captured evidence of paranormal activity on camera, including strange lights and orbs. Others have reported feeling cold spots, being touched, or experiencing inexplicable fear and anxiety. It's also important to note here, guys, that John Bell is the only person ever in recorded history, it says on his death certificate, to have been killed. His cause of death was caused by paranormal activity, paranormal circumstances. The only person in history that we know of that it says on his death certificate that he was killed by the paranormal or due to paranormal causes. So, as a team of paranormal investigators would go down in the cave, they would explore the cave, attempt to uncover evidence, the Bell Witch's existence. They're equipped with the latest ghost hunting gear, including infrared cameras, digital recorders, and AMF readers. Now, Sam McColby actually went to Bell Witch Cave, and some other paranormal investigators have been there. The investigations have captured some compelling evidence, including audio recordings of strange whispers and unexplained noises. They have also captured images of strange lights and shadows, which they believe could be evidence of the paranormal activity down there. Now, Bell Witch Cave remains a place of mystery and intrigue, attracting visitors from around the world. Whether you believe in the legend or not, this cave is sure to leave you with an unforgettable experience. Join us next time for more on the paranormal and more stories, such as this one today, the story of Bell Witch Cave. The Missouri State Penitentiary in Jefferson City, Missouri. A place where the walls run deep with history and whispers of the past still linger to this day. For over 175 years, this foreboding structure has held some of the most notorious criminals in American history, and it is said that their spirits still roam the halls to this very day. From 1836 to 2004, the Missouri State Penitentiary was home to over 85,000 inmates, including the likes of Jesse James and Charles Starkweather. But it was also a place of brutal treatment, harsh conditions, and tragic events. There was dungeon cells there, and I have toured that prison, guys. The dungeon cells are not a place that you would want to be. Totally dark down there, and it's just not a good place to be. Total darkness. There was a story about an inmate that ended up burning down one of the working shops, and he got put down there 23 hours a day in total darkness. They only brought him up so they could shower and they could eat. That was all the only two things they could do. 23 hours a day, though, and total blackness. Can you believe that? Just imagine how bad it would be if you encountered spirits down there, guys. And those stairs, there's nothing at the bottom of those stairs once you go. If you go and tour it, you will see exactly what I mean. Prisoners were subjected to physical and mental abuse, and many met with their end within the walls. It's no wonder that their spirits are said to still linger seeking justice or peace within the walls of the Missouri State Penitentiary. From disembodied voices to unexplained aspirations, the Missouri State Penitentiary is said to be one of the most haunted places in the United States. And when I was in there, it definitely is a very eerie feeling, especially when you get down to the gas chamber. In fact, here's a picture of me and my mom sitting inside that gas chamber. This is where they get a lot of the paranormal activity. This is where the readings are the highest whenever paranormal investigators go there. And then there's the underground cells that they found here not too long ago. And here's a picture of those. And guys, I couldn't imagine being kept down here in these cells. The dungeon cells were bad, but these are under the ground. Like physically under the ground. They had to dig them up to find these cells underneath there. Many have reported sightings of a ghost of a former inmate, only known as the Kid, who was wrongly accused and executed for a crime he did not commit. Others claim to have seen the spirits of former guards and officials still patrolling the halls, searching for escaped prisoners. The infamous hole, where prisoners were kept in solitary confinement for extended periods of time, many did not make it out of the hole alive. And guys, the dungeon cells, the hole, it was all just bad. If you go tour it, you'll see exactly what I mean. The Missouri State Penitentiary is a place where the past and present collide, where the walls whisper secrets of the dark and troubled history. And guys, there is so much going on at the Missouri State Penitentiary. We're going to be launching our own investigation to it here very soon. They do paranormal tours. They're only open up until November, so be sure to squeeze those tours in if you want to. But if you just go in there, you can feel it. Your tour guides will tell you there's spirits in there, there's ghosts. Cell doors have been known to just close on their own. And there's all kinds of things going on up at the Missouri State Penitentiary and Jefferson City. So, guys, at the end of the day, be vigilant of what's out there. God bless each and every one of you. At Myrtle Hill Cemetery in Valley City, Ohio, a spherical marble stone marks the grave of a woman who is a tormented soul. What form the torment took varies from story to story, but all portray the woman as Bistovikov, as suffering mental and physical abuse at the hands of her husband and young sons. Finally, the woman plotted her revenge. She decided to poison the family's water supply, the well in the backyard. She killed her entire family, then dumped them all into the well. With her family missing, it didn't take long for the neighbors to become suspicious of her. The bodies were eventually discovered, and the woman was arrested. She was deemed unfit to stand trial and instead was committed to the state mental hospital for the rest of her life. Upon her death, her remains were relocated to Myrtle Hill Cemetery and buried underneath the round stone. A variation of the legend says, in question was also a witch who turned to the dark side to seek her revenge. She said to have practiced her craft in and around the cemetery, including the nearby woods. It is also said that after the bodies of her husband and sons were discovered, the townspeople stoned the woman to death. Her body was then buried under the heavy sphere to keep her from rising from the grave. Such precautions did little good because the woman's spirit is said to have found a way to escape the grave and return to the places where she practiced her magic. It is also believed by Betty that the stone itself has soaked up some of the woman's evil, explaining why it feels warm to the touch in the winter and freezing in the summer. It is also said that the snow and leaves do not fall near the monument, suggesting that even nature is fearful of the witch's ball. The New Jersey Devil, also known as the Leeds Devil, is a legendary creature said to haunt the Pine Barrens of New Jersey. The story dates back to the 18th century and tells the tale of Mother Leeds, a local woman who had 12 children and was pregnant with a 13th child. According to the legend, Mother Leeds was frustrated with the burden of raising so many children and invoked the devil, saying, "May the devil take the next one." When her 13th child was born, it was a normal child at first, but then transformed into a creature with hooves, wings, and a goat-like head. The creature flew out of the chimney into the woods, where it has been said to roam ever since. The New Jersey Devil is often described as a winged horse-like creature with glowing eyes and a blood-curdling scream. It is said to haunt the Pine Barrens, causing mischief and terrorizing all the locals and travelers alike. Despite numerous sightings and encounters, the creature's existence has never been proven, and many consider it to be a legend or a hoax. However, the story remains a popular part of New Jersey folklore and continues to fascinate people to this day. La Fonda on the Plaza in Santa Fe, New Mexico is a luxurious hotel with a rich history dating back to the 1600s. The current building was constructed in 1922, but the site has previously housed various inns and a courthouse. According to legend, the hotel is haunted by John P. Slow, a former New Mexico Chief Justice who was shot and killed in the lobby. In 1967, guests have reported hearing his footsteps at night. 2. A bride was murdered on her wedding night, said to haunt the bridal suite. And number 3, a businessman who lost all his money gambling and jumped down the hotel well, now believed to haunt the premises. These paranormal legends add a spooky touch to the hotel's luxurious atmosphere, making it a fascinating destination for those interested in history and the supernatural. The Conjuring House, also known as the Perron Family Farm, is a legendary haunted house in Harrisville, Rhode Island. The story begins in 1974 when the Perron family, Roger Carolyn, and their 5 daughters moved into the old farmhouse. You guys who have seen the first Conjuring movies are probably familiar with this. This is that story. Initially, the family was excited to start their new life in the countryside, but soon strange things began to happen. Doors would slam shut on their own, objects would move around, and ghostly aspirations would appear. At first, they thought it might be the old house settling, but soon the occurrences became more frequent and intense. Desperate for help, the parents contacted famed paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. The Warrens arrived at the house immediately. Sensed a demonic presence, they began investigating and discovered the house had a severely dark history. In the 19th century, a witch named Bathsheba Sherman lived in the house. She was accused of practicing black magic and was believed to have made a pact with the devil. The Warrens believed that Bathsheba's spirit still haunted the house, seeking revenge on anyone who dared to enter her domain. The Warrens performed an exorcism to rid the house of Bathsheba's spirit, but it went horribly wrong. The spirit became way more aggressive, and the family was trapped. In the final confrontation, Ed faced off against Bathsheba. His faith and knowledge to defeat her. The Perron family escaped the house, and the Warrens sealed the entrance to the hidden room where Bathsheba's altar was located. The house remained standing, a testament to the horrors that took place within its walls. The story of the Conjuring House is a chilling reminder of the power of and evil and the bravery of those who dare to confront it. The house still stands today, a popular destination for ghost hunters, thrill seekers, but beware. The spirit of Bathsheba still lurks in the shadows, waiting for her next victim. Those of you who have seen the movie of The Conjuring are familiar with this. Ed and Lorraine, I've studied a lot of the cases that they dove into. They gathered a lot of evidence into the paranormal, and their film, their pictures, some of it has not been released because it's been deemed too graphic. If you guys have not checked out those other videos on YouTube of Ed talking about poltergeist and the Lindley Street hauntings and all kinds of other things, and we're going to be talking about those. I'm going to be going to these places and more in the future, guys, so stay tuned. You're not going to want to miss what we discover and what we do and the things that are going to be there. Make sure that you're sticking with us, and some of these are going to be live, so you're going to be seeing what we see in real time. God bless each and every one of you. I'm Jared with General Exploration and Discovery. The Stanley Hotel opened to the public in 1909. This Implement, Colorado property overlooking Estes Park and framed by the Rocky Mountains is best known for being the inspiration behind Stephen King's 1977 novel, The Shining. King spent a lonely winter night here with his wife in 1974, so lonely, in fact, that they were the hotel's only guest. That night, the author awoke from a nightmare that his son was being chased through the hotel's eerie halls by a fire hose. By morning, King had already formed a rough outline of what would become one of the most iconic horror stories to date, The Shining. Today, tales of ghost sightings and strange happenings at the Stanley Hotel have garnered property a haunted reputation. To hear these stories and possibly come back with one of your own, book one of the hotel's hour-long night tours where you can learn about the spooky backstory behind the historic hotel. Daring guests can even opt to stay overnight at one of the hotel's spirited rooms, those reported to have the highest levels of paranormal activity. These include rooms 401, 407, 428, and 217. The very suite where King was inspired to create The Shining. While recent travelers loved the Stanley Hotel's beautiful grounds and old worldly charm, some felt the hotel was lacking amenities. If you plan your spooky stay for October, you may be able to catch Estes Park Annual Elk Fest, a top fall festival. Welcome back to JNR Exploration Discovery, everybody. I'm Jared, the Jan and JNR. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the Amityville Horror. Those of you who have seen the movie, The Amityville Horror, those of you who have read the book, The Amityville Horror, probably know a lot about this. You guys might also know that some strange things happened on their set. There's some paranormal things that went on there, and a family was murdered in that house. So we're going to walk you through the story today in today's video, and also talk about some of those strange things that happened on set, including where one of the actors nearly drowned out there in the lake. Similar things happened on the Exorcist set as well, to where actors were getting attacked and things were happening. So we're going to tell you the story about the Amityville Horror for those of you guys that don't know it, and give you some more details to those of you guys that do know it. So we're going to start off in Long Island, New York. That's where the Amityville house is. In 1974, a horrific mass murder took place in this quiet little suburban town. Ronald DeFeo Jr. killed 6 members of his family in their own home at 112 Ocean Avenue. The house would later become known as the Amityville Horror House. That famous house that people fled to. Ed and Lorraine Warren investigated it. Those of you who've seen the beginning of The Conjuring have also seen where the lady that plays Lorraine is talking about it, and how Ronald DeFeo said that he was under the possession of something and he wasn't in his right mind whenever he murdered his entire family. So that's what he claimed. Of course, in the court of law, they did not see it that way. He got sentenced to life in prison, and he just passed away not too long ago. So there's something to be said about all that, guys. Was it possession, or was it something else that caused him to do this? Whatever it was, the devil was definitely at work in one way or another. The Lutz family, George, Kathy, and their 3 daughters, who had no idea what had happened in the Amityville house and the occurrences that occurred there, they moved into the house. And soon after, the occurrences started happening, doors slamming shut on their own, eerie noises, and ghostly aspirations. Paranormal activity got even more intense the longer they stayed there. Possessions moving around on their own, ghostly voices, and unexplained cold spots. They sought out the help from priests and paranormal investigators. An exorcism was performed, and the Lutz family lasted only 28 days inside of that house. 28 days is all they lasted inside the Amityville house because of the horrible things that were happening there. And it just further adds into Ronald DeFeo Jr.'s claims that he could have been under the possession of something. Now, guys, usually that stuff has got to be invited into your life. It's got to be invited in willingly, but sometimes you invite it in willingly without even realizing it. It poses as something good, and you invite it into your life just by giving in to certain things, desires, your desire to hurt people, your desire to do this and that, and sin is the way to it. The more you sin, the more you open that gateway for that stuff. Also, just the energy that you put out attracts stuff in. There's actually a deal to where even back in the day, yoga poses used to be a thing of signaling certain entities into your house. So, looking at that, guys, and you could be attracting stuff that you don't even know that you're attracting, and there's a lot of other things going there. The Amityville house is just one story that just stands the test of time, and something that is super eerie. Again, it was another case that Ed and Lorraine Warren investigated, and it was a case unlike so many others. All these cases are the same, but they're different in so many ways. So, stay vigilant, guys. There's a lot of things out there. I told you guys I was going to walk you guys through some things that happened in the movie. One of the actors almost drowned out there in the lake after an accident. The details are still kind of unclear, but it was in the middle of the night and they were filming. And for those of you guys that don't know about the Amityville Horror, it actually has some big-time actors in it. So if you're interested, go watch the movie, read the book. But guys, be vigilant of what's out there. God bless each and every one of you. I'm Jared, Journal Explorations. The idea that children should be seen and not heard did not hold true for Gracie Watson when she was alive. It doesn't hold true now. In fact, now it's just the opposite. Little Gracie makes herself heard but not seen. She is said to haunt the site of her parents' famed source, the former Palace Deck Hotel in Savannah, Georgia. The Watsons ran the hotel in the early 1880s, and Gracie was born in 1883. Northerners who longed to fit into Savannah society, the Watsons began inviting the city's elite to elaborate parties, with Gracie as an adored paint-sized hostess. Her father's pet, she charmed the upper crust until she became bored, at which point she would wander off to play under a stairwell at the back of the house. Gracie died at the tender age of 6 after a bout with pneumonia. She was sorely missed. Her father had a statue commissioned in her likeness to her gravesite in the cemetery. A marker at the grave tells the story. Little Gracie Watson was born in 1883, the only child of her parents. Her father was manager of the house where the beautiful and charming little girl was a favorite with the guests. 2 days before Easter, in April 1889, Gracie died of pneumonia at the age of 6. In 1890, when the rising sculptor John Waltz moved to Savannah, he carved from a photograph this life-size statue, detailed marble, which for almost a century has captured the interest of all passerbyers. It's not just Gracie's gravesite that captures the interest of people in Savannah. Little Gracie, it has been reported, it's still out there. While the hotel building still stood, it was said that a child could be heard playing under the stairwell, yet no child was in sight. And the new building that went up after the hotel was raised in 1957, the area around its former staircase became the site of the ladies' room. Many a surprised visitor is said to have been startled by Gracie's antics. Now that the new building houses a bank, it remains to be seen whether Gracie's will continue to haunt the premises without the familiar din of people eating, laughing, and talking. Will Gracie feel at home? Perhaps she will wander off in search of more entertaining diversions, as she was long ago known to do. The legend of Goatman's Bridge is a chilling tale that has been passed down for generations in Texas. The story takes place in the early 20th century during a time of racial tension and violence in the United States. According to the legend, a black man named Oscar Washburn was a successful farmer and businessman in the small town of Denton. He was known for his intelligence, kindness, and generosity, and was respected by both black and white communities. However, Oscar's success and reputation attracted the attention of the local KKK, who resented his prosperity and influence. One night, a group of Klansmen, led by a man named William Carter, abducted Oscar and took him to the old Elm Creek Bridge, where they brutally lynched him. As Oscar's body hung from the bridge, the Klansmen allegedly performed a twisted ritual, sacrificing him to the devil in exchange for power and control. The legend says that Oscar's spirit was transformed into a demonic creature known as the Goatman, who is doomed to roam the bridge for eternity, seeking revenge on those who had wronged him. Over the years, numerous people have reported strange occurrences and sightings on Goatman's Bridge, including glowing eyes and strange lights, unexplained noises and whispers, shadowy figures and aspirations, mystery car trouble and breakdowns, disappearances, and unexplained events. Some believe that the Goatman is an entity driven by a desire for revenge and a need to relive the horrors of his past. Others think that he is a restless spirit trapped between worlds and seeking peace. Despite the legend's dark origins, Goatman's Bridge has become a popular destination for thrill seekers and paranormal enthusiasts who come to explore the bridge, its eerie surroundings. However, be warned. Legend says that if you cross the bridge at night, you'll be cursed by the Goatman's wrath. What started out in the mid-1800s as a modest 8-room farmhouse in California's Santa Clara Valley has become one of the most recognizable and notoriously mysterious mansions and haunted house attractions in America. The Winchester Mystery House is known today. The sprawling and incurious Queen Anne Revival Home was Rifle Heiress Sarah Pardee Winchester's constantly in progress and forever unfinished hobby home that she dubbed a villa in honor of the region's Spanish roots and her love of the Basque Country. As the widow of William Winchester, whose family's company, the Winchester Repeating Arms Company, Sarah came into a $20 million inheritance along with 50% ownership in the firearms business. When William died in 1881, that fortune enabled her to transform the humble ranch house to a massive mansion on hundreds of acres, but it also fueled rumors that Sarah built the home to escape the spirits of those killed by the Winchester rifle. Following the deaths of multiple family members, including her infant daughter in 1865, her father in 1869, her mother in 1880, both her father-in-law and husband in 1881, and her sister in 1884, Sarah left her hometown of New Haven, Connecticut to make a fresh start just outside of San Jose, California. Within just a few months, she had already added more than a dozen rooms onto her new home with the intention of accommodating her two little sisters and their families. For the next 38 years, reports claimed the property would be constantly under construction, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Sarah designed all of the additions on her own despite having no formal training in construction, ended only upon her death and the mansion in September 1922, living it incomplete and her plans unfinished. What stands today is a 4-story, 160-room, 24,000 square foot mansion constructed mostly out of redwood on less than 5 remaining acres of land in one of the city's most heavily trafficked West Valley neighborhoods. The home has 2,000 doors, some leading straight into blank walls, 10,000 windows, some interior facing, 47 fireplaces, 17 chimneys, 40 stairways, at least one of which leads to the ceiling, 40 bedrooms, 2 ballrooms, 1 completed, 1 unfinished, 13 bathrooms, 6 kitchens, 3 elevators, 2 basements, and a wood-paneled dining room. There are gold and silver chandeliers, hand-inlaid flawless antique floors, and many original stained glass windows rumored to have been created by Tiffany at one point to the 1906 earthquake. The house stood 7 stories tall, but it was reduced likely due to the damage caused by the quake. In fact, after the quake, Sarah all but stopped work on the front wing of the house. Luckily, the home was spared total destruction during both the 1906 and 1989 earthquakes because it was built on a floating foundation, a design that allows the structure to move freely, and it's semi-attached to its base. Few people aside from household staff and teams of carpenters and other workmen were invited to the mansion during Sarah's lifetime, and very few, if any, interior photographs were taken. The furniture inside the home today reflects the period, but her personal belongings, including the contents of the house, were left to her niece, Marin Marriott, who kept what she wanted and sold the remainder at auction. It's a question people have asked ever since Sarah started construction. In order to make sense of this perceived monstrosity and what was then a rural community, rumors began to swirl about her motivations. According to folklore, Sarah was motivated to build a home with such odd features because a medium told her that the ghost of those killed by the Winchester rifle would haunt her until the day she died, unless she went out west to build a house with a room for all of them. Other versions of the story, perhaps Sarah was driven because she was being haunted in the family mansion in New Haven. Unfortunately for her, the ghost followed her to California, so she tried to outsmart them by building a rambling home with a triangle of hallways. Historians have never been able to corroborate the visit with the medium, and many of Sarah's longtime employees and friends denied the story both during and after her lifetime. And of course, the truth is likely a bit simpler. Sarah's father had been a carpenter during the height of the Victorian period, and so she grew up loving design and architecture. She later subscribed to many magazines and journals on the subjects and taught herself the craft. The rumors only grew after her death when the property sold at auction to a private investor for around $135,000. Today, that's worth just north of $2 million. It was then leased to John and Maine Brown for a 10-year period. The couple opened the house up to the public in 1923 and eventually bought the property, which is now owned by a privately held company that represents their descendants. The home was designated a historical landmark in 1974 and is listed in the National Registry of Historic Places. In September of 2019, one of the many mysteries of the Winchester House, as the National Registry of Historic Places refers to it, was solved during restoration work in one of its many, many dining rooms. According to the Times, union workers were removing parts of the wall when they noticed something peculiar, a beautiful preserved envelope tucked inside from 100 years ago, the Pacific American Decorative Company. This discovery confirms something that many historians had a hunch about. The true artisan who made its impeccable stained glass windows. Recently, architectural historian Jim Wolfe dug into the mystery of who actually created them. And he landed on the answer that it was actually glassworker John Mullen. Well, turns out Mullen owned Pacific American Decorative Company. Case closed. There's still a lot of mystery around the Winchester mystery home, and some say it's haunted. There's been a lot of paranormal investigations that have taken place there. Colby and Sam and Colby, however you want to say it, they have been there along with a lot of other paranormal investigators. It is extremely strange. If you ever watch videos on it, it is definitely worth the price of a ticket of admission if you ever get a chance to go check it out. Some of the doors lead nowhere. Some of the windows are just on the wall. The panes are just in the wall. There's no actual windows there. There's staircases, like I said, that one of them led just straight up to the ceiling. It's a mystery. There's a lot of history and stories behind it, such as, like what I described earlier, of a medium that told Sarah that if she ever stopped building the house, then she would die from the spirit. So she kept building, and it used to be way bigger, but 2 stories of it got destroyed in a disaster. So there's a lot of mystery that remains there, guys, but it's definitely something that if you're into paranormal, if you're not into paranormal and you just like kind of out there things, then the Winchester Mystery House could be for you. God bless each and every one of you. California has more than its share of ghostly residents, and true to its West Coast way of life, many of them are stars from the times of the past. While stories of the spirits of Marilyn Monroe and Howard Hughes are well known, these 2 legends have supposedly been glimpsed in dozens of locations. The state is home to places where the presence of spirits isn't merely a fabrication to boast a tourist trade. In fact, were these buildings left in their original condition, no sane tourist would set foot in them. And though such places usually get facelifts, much like aging stars, their souls stick around. A case in point is Carmelio State Mental Hospital, built in 1936 in the small coastal town of Carmelo, a jumping-off point for the Channel Islands. The State Mental Hospital first opened its doors in the era when people with mental disorders were called crazies, lunatics, or criminally insane. The acreage around the facility was used as farmland, complete with a dairy. The patients, alcoholics, pedophiles, or those who with mental illness, retardation, or violent tendencies had no need to leave the grounds for any of their needs, nor were they allowed to. By the 1950s, more than 7,000 people, some as young as 11 years old, were housed in the massive facility. Patients wore tan jumpsuits to distinguish them from the facility staff and to make it easier to identify any patients who tried to escape. The rowdiest were routinely kept under control with powerful drugs. Those who were still uncontrollable were subjected to electroshock therapy. Another routine treatment was to immerse the patients in hot water, then wrap them in ice-cold towels immediately after they were pulled out. Still others were strapped to their beds until they were exhausted themselves. Investigations of hospital revealed brutality on the part of the guards and incidents of inmates abusing and even killing one another. Given Carmelio's House of Horrors atmosphere, it will come as no surprise that people who either worked or lived there have had some compelling stories of the hauntings that have occurred there. A female janitor got a shock one evening when cleaning the women's restroom. As she bent to pick something up off the floor, she noticed a pair of legs, which she described as obviously belonging to a man, under the door of a stall. When she called out to the person, there was no answer. She pushed the door open only to find the stall was empty. She refused to enter the restroom again. Another employee, a nurse named Debbie, had a strange encounter while sneaking a cigarette during a rainy day. Not wanting to go outside in the rain, she opened the doors to the courtyard and led up. No sooner had she taken her first puff than as soon as she put it, someone grabbed her roughly by the shoulders and shook her hard. When she turned to see who it was, there was no one there. On one occasion, a 65-year-old nurse claimed to have been grabbed by the hair and pulled backward out of the chair by an unseen assailant. Though there were no witnesses to the accident One of the nurse's co-workers, a 10-year-old veteran of Carmelio named Cheryl Downey, thought the story was eerie, but it wasn't until her own encounter with the supernatural that she began to believe a former male patient was picking on women. She says that during one of the busiest times of the day, just after breakfast, she spotted a man she'd never seen before outfitted in a uniform worn by the patients in the old days of the asylum. He was walking into the women's restroom. When she called out to stop him, he continued as if he hadn't heard her. Cheryl called her co-worker to rouse to the man, but the room turned out to be empty. There were no other exits or windows, so the man couldn't have left without anyone seeing him. As Cheryl puzzled over his sudden disappearance, her co-worker screamed. The man was standing directly behind Cheryl and then promptly vanished in the thin air. In the mid-'70s, things changed at Carmelo. The institution examined its policies and began working to actually heal the patients instead of locking them away. By the early 1990s, conditions had improved significantly. Patients were taught real skills and underwent less radical types of therapy. A petting zoo was even added to help the developmentally challenged children and the residents. Towards the end of the Reagan administration, the president instituted a new legislative mandate of deinstitutionalization. It heralded for the end of Carmelio as patients were moved to other facilities or released back into the streets. Carmelio closed its doors in 1997, marking the end of an era. Still, scars left by the old treatment methods remain. Future employees, as well as workers who would renovate the buildings, tall tales of phantom presences, moving objects, and several strangely coincidental deaths. Even movie crews, which had used the buildings for several set locations, have reported strange encounters. Most people who've entered the old hospital grounds are affected in one way or another. Headaches and nausea are very common, as are dizziness and fatigue. Many who enter say they feel they are being watched or threatened. While such feelings can be put down to the imagination, it's the eyewitness accounts that provide a chilling view into the past of Carmelio State Hospital. Many have heard the voices and laughter of children at the building, once designated as a children's center, and the former petting zoo as well. A beautiful woman in white, assumed to be a nurse, roams the hallways of the bell tower, only to vanish when confronted. There are also reports of an old woman who walks the grounds outside the bell tower, and a man who sits at the bus stop. There's even a chattering ghost in the bell tower's ladies' room. While on location shooting in May 2004, several members of the film crew reported tools missing, tools later found, and unopened rooms. Set builders talked of windows slamming shut on their own, microwave ovens thrown to the floor, and strange knocking on the walls. Cold spots were also common in the building. Several of the crew quit saying the place was just too creepy. There even appears to be something strange about the back road into the hospital, which has been the scene of several unexplained car accidents. Although the road wasn't heavily traveled, car crashes on it were frequent. Following an incident that killed a Carmelio nurse, an autopsy showed that the otherwise healthy woman had suffered a freak brain embolism. Its connections to celebrities have amplified the reputation of the Carmelio State Mental Hospital. Jazz legend Charlie Parker stayed for 7 months after a nervous breakdown in 1947, and soon after recorded his hit Relaxing at Carmelio. The old hospital is also remembered by some to be the inspiration of the Eagles' 1976 hit Hotel California. The complex has taken on new life since its 1997 closing. Renovations began in 2000, and 2 years later, the buildings that were once considered the most notorious mental hospital in California opened their doors once again. This time, the California State University Channel Islands. The buildings look the same as before on the outside. Inside, cells have been converted into classrooms and dorms. The restless souls, however, seem to remain. Aspirations appear with little regard of time, of year, or day. However, the current school administrators and other governing bodies seem to want to forget about Carmelio's storied past. So your best chance of encountering a ghost on the campus is to roll for a semester and keep your eyes open. And what is now a trend with old prisons, the Wyoming State Penitentiary has become something of a tourist attraction. Public functions are held on its grounds and inside, including a bazaar and a haunted Halloween tour. These interested can follow the paths of the damned all the way to the gas chamber. Guides are always willing to share their experiences in the building, and while some of the stories may sound unbelievable, there are always corroborating witnesses be the employees or strangers. Tours geared towards paranormal enthusiasts are best taken during one of the evenings of Halloween, but that hardly means that All Hallows Eve is the only time to experience something unexplainable. As the guides themselves will tell you, there is always something happening, and you never know when something will catch you out of the corner of your eye. Hauntings can be a terrifying ordeal, but knowing how to deal with them and knowing how to deal with them in the right way can make all the difference. Welcome, everybody. If you're new here, I'm Jared with Jared Exploration and Discovery. We talk a lot about the paranormal on this channel. We also talk about some other things going on in the world, but this is our main focus. Today's video is going to pertain to how do you deal with hauntings and how do you identify the types of hauntings that you have. So those two things are going to be covered in today's video. First, I'm going to be talking about how to identify the type of haunting that you have, and then in the second part, I'm going to be talking about how you deal with it. And dealing with it is a very important part of getting your life back to normal. Ask anybody who has been there. So that being said, let's get into it. The first type of haunting we're going to talk about today is a residual haunting. A residual hauntings are imprints of the past events replaying like a recording. These ghosts are not aware of your presence and cannot interact with you. These are common signs of somewhere where there's been trauma that has happened, events of the past, such as people walking down the street, going to the movies. Things like this is an example of a residual. Now, a horrible event isn't going to cause this, but people who are stuck there, such as a janitor in a school who's going to go back and be mopping the floors because that's all he ever known, that is an example of a residual haunting. But they're not going to understand that you're there, but you're just going to see them doing their job, basically. The second type of haunting is an intelligent haunting. Involve ghosts who are aware of your presence and can communicate with you. They may seek help, attention, or resolution. Intelligent hauntings are entities or spirits who can communicate with you and they know what's going on. So they can think for themselves, they can act on their own, and they will communicate with you to try to get you to help them in some form or way. That is a form of an intelligent haunting. Poltergeist hauntings. For any of you guys who have seen the movie Poltergeist and have seen other things like this and heard about hauntings such as the Lindley Street haunting, poltergeist hauntings can be some of the scariest hauntings out there. Poltergeist hauntings are characterized by physical disturbances like objects moving or unexplained noises. These ghosts are often mischievous and attention-seeking. Poltergeist is actually a word meaning mischievous or noisy ghost. So they are often that. There are different types of poltergeist. There's a fire poltergeist. A fire poltergeist can actually maim you and actually kill you. There are rock-throwing poltergeists. Those are your most common types of poltergeist. This is where big boulders appear above a house without even knowing it. Ed Warren has seen this happen. Thousands of people have seen this happen. The rocks just appear, and then they fall in a zigzag pattern, falling down towards the house. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I've never seen a rock fall in a zigzag pattern instead of just falling straight down if it was up in the air. There are so many different types of poltergeists. Again, 4 different kinds. Your rock-throwing poltergeists are your most common. The fire poltergeist is the one that can really do harm to you. Demonic hauntings. Demonic hauntings involve malevolent entities that seek to harm or possess the living. These hauntings are often accompanied by a feeling of dread or evil. If you have seen the first Conjuring movie, this is a good example of a demonic haunting trying to possess the mother. The true story where Ed and Lorraine Warren again had to get involved, and the Perron family, and the mom ends up getting possessed by the spirit. Keynote though, the mom was actually an atheist at the time, the real mom. So this is why having God on your side and believing in God is such a powerful tool in dealing with the unknown. You've got to make sure that you have that power of God protecting you, because nothing can stand up to the power of God. The devil is powerful, yes. Demons are powerful, yes, but it's only temporary power. God has all the power in the end, and God will get all the glory in the end. That is something that you need to remember in the case of these hauntings, and don't give in to them. just because it seems like the easy thing to do. The fifth kind of hauntings on our list today, shadow people hauntings. Shadow people hauntings involve dark, shadowy figures that are often seen out of the corner of your eye. Their presence can be unsettling and even menacing. This is a well-known occurrence that has happened in houses that have had paranormal activity. You catch a glimpse of a shadow at the corner of your eye. You see something moving around. You see these presences. This is a very common occurrence. This is a very common occurrence with other types of hauntings as well, where people see shadowy figures out of the corner of their eye, but they turn and there's nothing there. Portal hauntings. Portal hauntings involve ghosts that use a certain location as a doorway between worlds. These hauntings can be intense and unpredictable. There is a key point here. There have been key points throughout different investigations that have been located that people believe spirits actually use. Ed and Lorraine Warren, again, I know I've been mentioning them a lot in this video, but the two most well-known paranormal investigators in the entire world. They were recognized by the Catholic Church. Why is that important? That is important because the Catholic Church is so picky about who they choose to send. Usually you have to be a priest for them for years. You have to become an exorcist. You have to be actually presented by them and certified by them. Ed was not. He was the only demonologist, and to my knowledge, still the only demonologist that was recognized by the Catholic Church. And Lorraine had special gifts from God. So, why do I mention them? They gather more evidence than anybody else in history, and they are the two best known and probably best paranormal investigators in history, and probably will go down that as that forever. So remember that, guys. The two best paranormal investigators in history. That's the reason I mentioned them so much in this video. Repeater hauntings. Repeater hauntings involve ghosts reliving moments, help them find closure by understanding their story and offering resolution. You may remember whenever I mentioned the residual hauntings earlier, to where the ghosts could not understand you. They did not communicate with you because they could not communicate with you. Well, these are a different type of haunting. These are ghosts that are trying to find closure, so that way they can go, as in somebody that got murdered, but they can't go on until their killer has been brought to justice. That is the kind of thing I'm talking about right here with the repeater hauntings. Different than a residual because these spirits can actually communicate with you. Remember that dealing with these types of hauntings, knowledge is power. Understanding the type of haunting you're dealing with can help you navigate the experience. Stay calm, seek help when needed, and always prioritize your safety. In the next part of this video, I'm going to be telling you guys how to deal with these hauntings, but I will give you guys this piece of advice now. Always consult an expert. Don't ever try to handle these matters on your own. Have somebody come in and investigate it. Ed and Lorraine Warren, yes, I mentioned them again. They investigated thousands of cases. Some of them turned out to be fact, and some of them were just the water pipes creaking or people that were just paranoid. But you can never be for sure. If you think something's amiss, then call in an expert to help you. We're going to go in the same order as this part of the video as we did in the first part of this video, guys. We're going to start off with the residual hauntings again. Again, the residual hauntings, the entities, the ghost, the person that you're saying, the spirit that you're saying, they cannot communicate with you. You cannot communicate with them. So all you really have to do is just act like they're not there, and everything will be all right. They cannot harm you. They cannot do anything to you. Intelligent hauntings, these can turn bad because demonic hauntings and other types of hauntings can also be intelligent hauntings because the spirits are able to communicate with you. This is where it's important to call in an expert. Again, guys, never try to handle this on your own. Contact Catholic Church. Contact places that actually have people on staff that can handle these types of things for you. They will come out. They will investigate. They will take care of it for you if there is. Poltergeist hauntings, definitely seek help with these types of hauntings. This is the type of haunting that drives people literally insane because they're mischievous, they're noisy, they tear up things, they throw TVs around, they throw your dishes out of the cabinet, they throw rocks, there's water poltergeist, there's all kinds of things a poltergeist can do depending on the type of poltergeist that you're dealing with. Again though, guys, the rock throwing poltergeist is your most common, and they will do some weird things. You will know when you're dealing with them. But it's always important, again, to seek help from professionals whenever it comes down to this. Now, the demonic hauntings are something. Definitely seek help. Don't let them get too far out of hand. If you can, get everybody else out of the house and make sure that you're not letting it spread. The best way to deal with this is to have a priest come by, bless the house, take care of things. I know a lot of these answers sound like that I'm saying the same thing, but you have to have professionals handle this, guys, and trust in God. I cannot say that enough. You have to trust in God, because God can battle and defeat anything. The shadow people hauntings, these are the ones that people tend to ignore as well, which honestly you can, until they turn into something worse, which most of the time they're probably not going to in the history of the shadow people hauntings. You see them out of the corner of your eye, but it's not a big deal. Just don't get too jumpy, don't get too spooky about it. Not something really to worry about. The portal hauntings, definitely call in an expert if you think that something is not right, and they will usually end up sealing off the room that it's happening in, or taking the object of where it's happening. Happened a lot. Happened in the Conjuring house. They sealed off the shrine that was in there. The repeater hauntings. This is where you really got to be careful, though, guys, because in the case of a repeater haunting and a demonic haunting, the repeater is looking for closure, but a demonic haunting will try to make you out as their friend. They'll try to be friendly to you, try to make it seem like they're not your enemy. So you've got to be alert to that. This is why I know you're probably going to hate what I'm about to say. Call in the expert. Always call in the expert, guys. You cannot go wrong calling in the expert. They have knowledge of this. They have demonologists. The Catholic Church is the only church that has full-time exorcists on the staff, to my knowledge. There's all kinds of things that you can do, and pray a lot and trust in God. Calling the expert, God is the ultimate expert in everything, guys, so there's a lot to be said there. Trusting God, calling the expert, have full faith, and everything will be okay. That's all you got to do. I know it's bad, and if any of you guys are going through these things right now, seek help. Please do, because it's just something that needs to be addressed, and there's all kinds of things out there, and everybody else around you may think you're crazy, but I guarantee you, we here at GNR Exploration Discovery don't think you're crazy. Experiences happen. We've known people who've had experiences, and a lot of people, they sound very insane too, but they don't sound insane to us, and you guys won't sound insane to us either. So, guys, we want to hear your stories. Shoot on over to our Facebook page, GNR Exploration and Discovery, and shoot on over to our Instagram page as well, same name. Tell us your story. We want to hear it, because we want to know what you guys have been through and how you guys ended up resolving it. So, a lot of things to be said about that. God bless each and every one of you. I'm Jared with GNR Exploration and Discovery. Subscribe and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Thank you for watching GNR Exploration and Discovery.